right, come back to your seats. You guys are gonna love this next chat. I looked at this slide deck and I'm super excited. So I got so many great comments yesterday about the event, and I cannot tell you how much that means. I appreciate that. I think day 2 might actually be better. So I can't wait to hear about that. So anyway, I want to introduce Mike Hornsby to you. You met him yesterday during the panel, during the teeter-totter, right of boom, left of boom conversation. And he gave a very modest introduction to himself, but I want to share a little bit more about where he comes from, what he does, a little bit of his heart for service around cybersecurity. So he started his IT career serving as an engineer in an MSP's 24/7 NOC, and then in downtown Chicago, which is where he still is. And he's got this almost a dual lightsaber type of thing where he's got the technical jargon, but he's also able to translate it into plain language, which is an awesome double-edged skill set to have. And then after joining the Marine Corps Reserve in 2018, he trained as cyber network administrator. And then in April of 2019, he joined Blokworx, where he heads up their US-based 24/7 SOC. So he leads that team. Obviously, they are supporting MSPs, and he continues to serve the country and a cyber defense capability. So US Marine Reserves recently participated in a multi-departmental red team, blue team exercise just to make sure that the national cyber defense readiness is in proper shape. So we're very, very blessed to be able to have him. He's got his Master of Science in Cybersecurity, has a growing family in the Chicagoland area. So obviously a very, very busy individual. And he's gonna come and chat with us about culture, and culture being your secret weapon. So please welcome to the stage, Mike Hornsby.
That's an introduction. Good morning. How are we doing on day 2? Energy's up, yeah? Okay. Did anybody go out after midnight and get some drink or some taco? Some cyber tacos? Were any cyber tacos consumed last night? No? Okay. How was dinner? Good? Wonderful. No, it was a rich time of fellowship, so thank you for coming out. Well, I don't have much to say more about myself, but let's get into the content. The purpose of you all being here is to learn. So my hope over the next little bit here is really to enlighten, educate, but also challenge maybe your current thinking on what is culture, what is organizational culture, how do I cultivate culture internally, how do I cultivate culture externally from like my marketing, my sales angle, right? So we're gonna talk about engineer and talent retention. We're gonna talk about how do you market or give your competitive edge in messaging to your partner base, and a little bit everything in between. So again, culture as your secret weapon here at the Ultimate IT Growth Conference. You hit the red button. Oh, there we go, all right. So again, senior solutions engineer, but I need to talk about the thing I love the most, and that's what I've been blessed with. That's my family. So I got 3 daughters, 5, 2, and new, and so I got the best way I could say it is my wife and I are sitting at the blackjack table with 18, hoping for a boy, right? And so, but no, I'm so blessed. I did not anticipate being a girl dad of 3, but just where we're at in 2023, it's a rich experience. It's a rich time. So my wife's holding down the fort now. We're actually moving in the beginning of July, and so I got to give kudos and shout out to her because I couldn't do what I'm doing here without her doing all that. So that's Odessa, our newest, in the bottom right. That's our oldest in the bottom at a kayaking trip up in northern Wisconsin. And then Everly, our fire child, is the middle one. So, but yeah, that's me, that's us, and let's talk about culture. So let's define it first. What is company culture? If anybody could, this is interactive, right? So what is company culture? If you had to define it in a sentence or 2, describe to me what culture is. And again, not what your culture is, but define what a company's culture, organizational culture is. Anybody? Yeah. Oh, right. What do you got?
Hello.
Hello.
I would say it's the values by which your employees kind of conduct themselves on a day-to-day basis, you know, not only within their job, but also I think that can extend to the personal life too. So
I think it should.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would even push that further and say it should. We should be congruent beings, both in work and out of work, right? That's it. What was your name? Can't say. Thanks for saying, yeah, great answer. Anybody else?
Can I answer it?
Yes.
I think it's about everything, the way you operate in both personal and professional life. Like, how do you, what do you do? How do you operate? How do you think? How does it influence your decisions?
How does it influence your decision? That's huge. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Anybody else? We got the mic. What do you got?
And just simply like how your people treat each other. It's just how human interaction goes at your company is
Yeah.
your litmus test for what your culture is, regardless of what you want it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's huge, right? I think in the past 3 years, we've really learned that through business continuity, through remote working models, I think we need each other in a room together more than we thought. More than we thought or anticipated before. And so now also on this stage yesterday, we talked about the culture. We talked about left of boom and how we're a bit conditioned, it would seem, to think more right of boom and more reactive based, not maybe maliciously, but more so because of the resources we have, because of the capabilities we have, right? And so let's unpack this further. So Time Magazine ran an article in October 2022 citing the following. It was titled, How Companies Evolved Their Cultures in Response to the Pandemic. So what they said was, so what exactly is a company's culture? It's not simply a set of values, which has been mentioned, written down on a piece of paper or posted on a website. Rather, it's a collective view of how to behave, which was already hit on, what norms are followed, and what's rites, rituals, language, and yes, behavior is accepted. Senior partner at McKinsey goes on to say, even more important, it's critical for the company to be both thoughtful and consistent in calling out behavior that's inconsistent with that culture. And this introduces something called accountability. We know this word? 2023 doesn't know this word very much, right? Am I alone in thinking that? Is culture, I'm wondering if the culture, as we unpack accountability, if this is becoming countercultural. Accountability is, right? I'm asking Ari, is it green shirt or red shirt day, right? Like, what's gonna go best? I wanna make sure I don't clash, right? And she can honestly tell me, hey, like, give you a straight answer. Now, that's a jovial example. But what does accountability look like? Hey, I really thought you did a great presentation. I think some of the things you said could have been misinterpreted. Here's why. And that's gold. You have friends like that, partners, business associates in your life like that. They're gonna shoot honestly with you. Those are your most valued assets. Those are most valuable friends. And so, again, we're going to unpack accountability here because I think it's directly relational to culture. Going about 7 years ago, another Time Magazine article ran, hold yourself accountable, you'll actually be happier. And let's unpack this further. So, life is filled with traps that let people avoid personal accountability. It's easy to make excuses, play the victim, feel a sense of entitlement, or procrastinate. Taking ownership for your actions and reactions, it's important to note both, lets you avoid anger, cynicism, envy, frustration, and instead focus on positive emotions and healthy living. Goes on to further say that research has shown that when employees feel accountable for their work, they are more likely to contribute to solving problems, achieving organizational goals, believing that if others would change, everything would be better, and then trying to force them to do so drives them apart. You need to start with an accountability culture. You need to start that, number one, everybody takes responsibility for their actions. Now, don't mishear me here. This is not a blame game culture. This isn't a headhunting culture. This isn't a witch hunting culture, right? This could be very conflated to be a negative thing. Accountability is healthy. I've been married for almost 8 years this December. I need accountability in my relationships, at the workplace. It's healthy, it's good for me. Regardless of what 2023 says, I need to be called to the pavement sometimes. And we need to start with that acknowledgement. Because I'll go on, I'll give you some keys to success on internal culture, external culture, how to market it with a competitive edge. But if we can't be on the same page about accountability, and it's still being necessary, regardless of what trending tides may say, we do need each other. We need each other to keep each other honest and built up in that way. And so it's wild that that's 2016, right? I don't know if 2023 we're going to see an article like this, if I'm being honest. And so, again, the fastest way to enhance relationships is to remove the blame that breaks them down. It's the exact point we just covered, right? Whether it's selling more products, building stronger connections, or making political change, owning up and taking responsibility can help us move forward. We don't see this very often. We don't see the owning up. So that means in your client interactions and your partner interactions, we mess up. We mess up. We're going to talk a little bit more about Blokworx core values, give you some actual practical framework of how we operate, put some flesh on bone. But one of them is candor. Express candor. What does that mean? It means if I'm going into the doctor and I need to be told I can lose 10 pounds, I need to be told I need to lose 10 pounds. And I also need to be ready to hear it. Otherwise, I'll go see another doctor. I'll get a second opinion, right? We'll see, right? And so again, accountability I think is directly proportional to culture. And some of you may be like, I get that. Mull over this for a second. Accountability and culture. You know, what kind of organizational culture are you guys and gals also standing up at your own workplaces? Is accountability talked about? Is the word used often? Do we use the word accountability, or is it seen as a negative? I had a great strategy meeting with my team about a year ago, last August. And we talked about accountability and how it can be conflated to be a negative thing. Does anyone have seen that or heard accountability in a negative connotation? Give me an example. Like, why would micromanage? Oh my gosh. Yes, I'm being micromanaged. I'm being told, asked if I followed up with somebody. Wow, of course I did. I don't ever forget anything, right? What about you?
Yeah, I was going to say micromanaging, like, they love to throw up the KPIs.
Yeah.
You hit these, and
Yeah.
we're all going to be accountable here because we're not in the right direction.
Right.
And it's more of a
I'm sorry, yeah. Get the microphone, I apologize. So talking specifically about KPIs and performance-based metrics
Yes,
being used as the
performance-based.
litmus test for accountability when, devil's advocate, because I was an engineer, under the mercy of KPIs, I could close 20 tickets. I can make it look like I'm working my butt off. Right? But is that an accurate metric of accountability all the time?
Yeah, no.
No, not necessarily. And so it's interesting to hear this feedback because it's right. Accountability can be conflated to be a negative, but really it is a positive. Yes?
Wishy-washy feedback, like feel-good feedback that doesn't correct.
Yes.
And on the other end, aggressive criticism
Yes.
without coaching.
Yes. That's huge. So I'm going to share a nugget of wisdom because that fired that synapse. I worked with Apple for about a year and a half, and their core value culture was unlike any other. Their training is top-notch, and I was able to take away, they have something called fearless feedback. And that's a framework that they operate in, and that all feedback that is general, meaning non-specific, has no value to anybody. Right? If I go up to somebody and say, good job, they'll forget that within 12 to 24 hours. Right? It doesn't make an impact. Now, if I say, Brian, I want to just call you out on something. There was a pretty troublesome ticket yesterday. The client came in hot. They were a little frustrated. However, you maintained your cool. You de-escalated that situation, and you made sure you brought value to that partner. You did a really great job. You emulated Blokworx core values, and you took care of the partner. Specific. They will never forget that for at least a year, if not more. Now, flipping it on its coin, let's go to negative, right? This conference sucks, right? Which nobody's saying. But what does that do? What does that do? It just erodes morale. It doesn't bring any value. It doesn't do anybody any good. Most likely an emotional response to something that's happened. But you know, I went down to Orlando. I attended an amazing conference. It was intentionally planned. It was immaculately executed. It was in a beautiful venue. You know what? This, that. But you could be specific about feedback in a really constructive way, right? And that's accountability. We need that. And so again, just a nugget of wisdom, if we're giving feedback, specific feedback, good or bad, have equal value, right? What was the question?
I was just
Or the point.
commenting on accountability. I think sometimes accountability is connected to consequence, right? And so if we can teach people that accountability is a willingness to learn or a
Yes.
willingness to be wrong and therefore learn. But I think so often as children and parents with our children, we teach, well, did you do that? Well, here's your consequence.
Wow. No, that's profound. Yes, accountability does not mean being put on a PIP, personal improvement plan, right?
How do you address the difference between accountability and personal responsibility?
That's a great question. I would reckon to say they're the same. That accountability has to start with the individual believing that I have personal responsibility for my actions. You know, I think it's important that the Time article actually calls out that your response also matters, right? Whether we're engaging with clients in a heated exchange, right? Because we know all of our clients never get heated. But people are under stress. These are stressful times to be running a business, providing services, right? And it's an economy that's providing complexity to solving these problems. But I heard something profound, and it was your response is your responsibility. Your response is your responsibility. It's not to be blamed on the other person. Well, they came at me and said that I was wearing the wrong color shirt, right? Or they came at me and said that I wasn't working hard enough. Or they came at me and said I wasn't being considerate. Your response is still your responsibility. And before I can inform any of you on how to maintain culture or cultivate a culture as a secret weapon, we need to be on even playing ground when it comes to personal responsibility, which I would reckon to say is the nature of accountability. So, excellent point. So let's unpack this further. Okay, culture as your secret weapon internally. I'm going to pivot. It's just a short video. It's like 3 or 4 minutes. But Jocko Willink, former Navy SEAL, leadership coach, entrepreneur. This guy's done everything. He has supplements. He has Origin, which is a manufacturing plant up in Maine that he's using to bring back American manufacturing when it comes to denim, US-based cotton, boots, leather work, just hard craftsmanship back to the United States. And so Jocko has a little bit to say about this. We're going to see this for about 4 minutes, and then we can unpack it a little bit more as we talk about culture internally.
Good. Say I'm at a really big construction company. We work across the entire United States, thousands and thousands of people. I've got to the executive level, so I have some degree of influence, but I'm not at the top, and it's a huge organization. And there's a lot of issues like high turnover and really non-existent culture, just poor culture. We see this a lot, is turnover is very, very high, and the culture is just not really there. Where do you start in a situation like that?
Yeah, so that's what came first, the chicken or the egg. Mm-hmm. But it's actually, what's our problem? Are we losing people, and that's why we don't have culture, because no one stays here long enough? Or is it because we don't have culture, that's why we lose people? I'm going to go ahead and say we don't have culture, and that's why we're losing people. And so how do we start to build a culture inside of an organization? Well, there's a couple ways to do it. The first way is to model the correct behavior, right? Model the correct behavior about what we're doing and how we do it. And then the other important part is to capture the stories that make us who we are, which there's a lot of companies out there that don't do this very well at all. That's what culture is. Culture is stories from the past, where we came from, what we've done. Well, how do we do that inside of a construction company? Let's talk about the projects that we've done. Let's talk about what we've built. Let's explain how we have added to our community. Let's explain how people have risen up through the ranks. How about we make a story about the person that's been here for 34 years? How about we highlight them? How about we explain and show that connection between the people that are here and the company that we have? So we have to build culture inside of an organization. We have to. How do you do it? You model the correct behavior, and you have to capture the stories that represent who you are and who you want to be. I've joked about this. The Marine Corps does just an outstanding job of this. They tell stories about the Marine Corps. They had a manual that was released called "The Squad Leader Makes a Difference," and this was like a two-pronged attack. Number one, they want decentralized command, so they wrote a whole book called "The Squad Leader Makes a Difference." And then number two, in that book, they tell the stories of these squad leaders that made a huge difference. So they enhance not only the knowledge and understanding of decentralized command, they also enhance the culture of the Marine Corps. But if we're a construction company, think about what a construction company is. A construction company builds the economy inside this country, and on top of that, it builds the basically everlasting things that make up our landscape. That's what a construction company is. What an incredible story to be able to tell. I know when I work with construction companies, I'll drive around whatever city and they'll be like, yeah, we built that. That's 1974. That was 1993. That was 1995. That was a great job. We had a setback because this happened. But we were able to overcome it. So what are we doing inside the organization so that people understand not just what we've done, but who we are? Who are our people? Who can we highlight? What can we tell? You know, if you've got someone that's been working at a construction company for 28 years, that person's got some stories to tell. So let's tell those stories so people understand who, not just what we do, which they should understand that, but who we are and why we do what we do.
Who we are and why we do what we do. Insightful? 4 minutes of Jocko will give you 3 hours to chew on. So I think 4 minutes was all we could handle, right? But I think it's important to note really internally how we can think of, you know, hey, if I have that rock star engineer, that rock star marketer, that rock star resource, how can I highlight them? How can I help tell a story? How can I help exude, reward core value like behavior? You know, and it's, again, we talked about accountability solely being a negative response to a negative reaction. Are we rewarding core value emulating behavior? Are we calling people out in a good way? Everybody, when I said calling everyone out, everyone was like, to rebuke? To condemn? No, you can call people out and shout them out, right? And so internally, for retention, for cultivating that culture internally, again, not just thinking about the what we do, but the why we do it. And that's going to segue us pretty elegantly externally. So again, that was how do I cultivate the culture internally at my organization? Maybe some nuggets of wisdom there. But now I'm going to give you some practical steps of how do I do this externally? How do I do this with my clients? How do I make this a competitive edge? How do I truly make culture my superpower? How do I use this in my marketing? How do I use this in my engagements? And we're going to start with the premise of Simon Sinek wrote a book called Start With Why. Start with why, okay? And he did a TED Talk back in 2017 that basically his whole thesis was our angle of approach for telling any story or marketing any product or selling any service is upside down. It is upside down. And I'll do as best justice as I can here to unpack this. But number one, we talked about culture, we talked about accountability. And if you don't believe in your company's culture, your prospect won't ever. So if you don't have a firm, grounded awareness, or if you can't say, this is what the culture is at Blokworx, this is what the culture is at MSP Sales Revolution, this is our culture, this is who we are. Why? Because we've encountered adversity. This is how we've overcome it. This is the stories, this is the people, this is the trenches, the stories from the trenches, right? But if you don't ever believe that, or you don't have a firm grasping of that, I promise you, your prospect won't feel it. They won't feel the passion. They won't feel the enthusiasm. And so again, that's why I started internally to cultivate that and encourage you all, take the week, take next week early, think about that. Start those strategic discussions internally. What is our culture? Is it toxic? Are there some good things we're doing? Probably most definitely. Are there some bad things we're doing? And here's the bonus objective. Ask your employees. Hey, what's the culture like working here? If there's anyone brave enough to ask that question. But this is why it starts with accountability. Why? Because we're accountable for the culture we make. We're accountable, right? And so again, we're pivoting externally, and ultimately people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Right? They buy why you do it. Do they love the uptime? Do they love the KPIs? Do they love the candor during the QBRs and the TBRs? Most definitely. But they're not going to buy anything from you if they don't trust you as a person. Right? You don't buy anything from anyone most often that you don't trust. Right? And so let's take this, we'll unpack this visually. Here's how most, if not all, most sales pitches go, and I'm not saying Jennifer's framework or any specific sales pitch, but here's how I've received most pitches in my life. We start from the outside in. So what that means is whenever I start with the outside in, surely our clients can understand the technical facts, the technical jargon, the 99% efficacy, 99.7% false positive rate, sub 10 millisecond response time. These are all things we do at Blokworx. They don't generate an emotional response. They don't cultivate a relationship. They're factoids, right? And so what I see most often is we start with the what. What do we do? Well, I'm US-based SOC. I lead with endpoint defense, secure cloud unified defense. We have the lowest latency and response time, the highest efficacy of prevention. We do that because we partner with Deep Instinct, partner with Avanan, we partner with leading edge vendors that are able to enable us to do what we do. Why do you do that? I don't know. I need money. I got 3 girls that love going shopping. They love eating. They love traveling, right? Like why? I don't. Is anyone compelled to move, make a decision? No. So why do we sell like this? We sell on factoids. I'll tell you why we sell like this. Because for the vast majority, not everybody, is we're nerds. That's what gets us excited. Am I wrong? Right? It's got the cool, you got to see this portal. You got to see this report, right? I'll tell you right now, if you asked 100 out of 100 of your clients, your end users, if you ask them, do you care what AV I run in your environment? What are they going to say? No. Stay out of my way. Let me work. Right? So that's why the what isn't compelling necessarily anyone to an immediate decision or a deciding point. So I'm not saying this is flawed. I'm just calling attention to this, that this is how most technical pitches go. They start with the what, and then I talk about how I'm able to do that, but I don't really have a firm grounding on why. And quite frankly, if I leave why for the end, it sounds like a platitude. It sounds like a platitude. If I'm expressing candor, it sounds like a platitude. So let's flip it. So what does this sound like, right? If you go with the what, how, and why approach, I completely understand what you do, MSP, provider, but I don't feel right about moving forward at this time. Has anyone heard this? Yeah? That's because there was no emotional connection. It was facts, it was figures, it was logistics, it was jargon, which is all important. And I'll show you that momentarily. But we need to flip it. So when we communicate from the inside out, we're just going to inverse this. Same exact model, same exact steps. We're just going to flip it. We directly speak to a relational connection that we make because of the passion we carry found in our why. Then we allow people to empirically rationalize it with technical features, benefits, and what sets us apart from the competition. So let's unpack this. This is all rhetorical. I'm making this up. Ford was founded as the first automotive maker in America. We found that American manufacturing was superior in World War I, World War II, and we wanted to channel that to benefit the American people. So Henry Ford started a company out of his own garage to start manufacturing vehicles to solve problems for Americans that horse-bound carriages couldn't solve, logistics couldn't solve. He had $100 to his name, and he started it out of his garage. That's his why. How is he able to do that? Well, through sourcing parts locally, local blacksmiths and things like that, and mechanical engineers at the time with wartime experience and how engines work. He was able to meet with the right people, and then the what just happens to be the #1 truck seller in America. There's a story behind it. There's a story behind it. What about Blokworx? What's our why? Our why is we started as an MSP in 2006, pivoted in 2016 to an MSSP just for MSPs. Why? Because we didn't find the candor that we wanted. We didn't find the straightforwardness in the channel that we wanted out of a provider. We wanted straight answers when it came to security. These are people's lives on the line, these people's jobs on the line. Average ransomware, ransoms up in 6 figures, almost $1 million. That will sink a small to medium-sized business. They're not recovering from that. I'm not saying insurance isn't valuable, and I'm not saying insurance isn't an asset. I'm just saying most don't recover. 60% of businesses under 50 employees that encounter a ransomware event fizzle out in 2 years because of the hit, right? So we take our why very seriously. We are defending livelihoods. That is our why. Now, how do we do that? And what are we doing is the next steps to that. But what does this sound like? If you lead with why, then how, then what, I believe in their cause. I believe what they say. Ultimately, I trust them. It feels right on top of the technological differentiators that set them apart. Because you need to understand your clients are getting pitches. They are. Every day, advertisements, Reddit, YouTube, whatever it is. We are getting bombarded with ads. They are hearing this message. But what makes you different? What is your culture? What is your story? Are you using that as a competitive edge? So that's externally. So let's talk about culture as a secret weapon at Blokworx. Okay? So Blokworx President Rob Bowles worked at Pac Bell, AT&T for many years, becoming a subject matter expert on securing complex networks for everything from SMB to large-scale enterprise. Leveraging DoD, military, and private sector components, Blokworx started as an MSP, as I had mentioned, pivoted to an MSSP that is channel only, meaning we no longer work with end-user clients direct. We work solely with MSPs, providing solutions that are scalable, prevention-centric, and certain around you sleeping well at night and you providing security for your clients. Now, that's the why. That's the why. Today, the Blokworx team, over 60% of which are current or former U.S. military service members, fulfill our core purpose of defending livelihoods. This is our why. Because we know that if we fail in our mission, people's businesses, income, goals, and livelihoods are at risk. That is why we do what we do. And if you ask, hold me accountable. Hold me accountable. Ask Rob Bowles. Message him on LinkedIn. Ask him what our why is. Is it defend livelihoods? Is it to grow and scale and become the #1 MSSP in America? Is it to displace a variety of solutions? No, it's to defend people's livelihoods. That is why we do what we do. And we accomplish this mission and simultaneously fulfill our core purpose through adhering to the following core values. So I get to unpack these. This is fun. You get to be a part of the Blokworx team for a little bit. This is our DNA training, so you can humor me a little bit. Hold the long view. Hold the long view. Anybody want to unpack this with a microphone? Anybody want to unpack this? What does hold the long view mean? Yeah, hold the long view.
Don't make a short-term problem distraction from mission. So focus on vision and mission. Look past the day of immediacy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Hold the long view. I love that image. The guy's speeding up time. He's like, oh man, if I could just push time faster. No, hold the long view. Hold the long view. Embrace candor. Now, I got to speak to the source of this graphic. We have hypothetical partners that hypothetically could be MSPs. And they hypothetically know what they're doing all the time. But what we've found is that as our greatest differentiator, sometimes you just need to be held accountable. You just need to be told straight. And when it comes to security, we really can't mince words. And so the Candor Hammer, as it's now known, was born through an interaction where a partner was troubleshooting something, our service was deployed, they were emphatic. They were emphatic. It was, hey, it's disable the AV, disable the AV, disable the AV, disable the AV, right? And I promise you, we're not seeing action being taken. I promise you, I'm not here to ruin your life. I'm not here to raise your ticket count. I'm here to keep your partner safe, right? And sometimes we need to drop the Candor Hammer. And that's where that comes from. But embracing candor is really where trust is built. If you go to your primary care physician and you don't trust them, you're not going to keep going to them, ultimately. And that applies to anywhere in life. In relationships, your spouse, your significant other, your partner, we need candor in our relationships. I didn't start this presentation with accountability accidentally. We need that. And so that's the Candor Hammer. Got to credit Tanner Hart for that. Winning or learning. I think it was Jennifer that called this out not too long ago. Winning or learning. Or no, it was also around accountability, right? Because accountability is we're always losing. Anytime I'm held accountable, I've lost. No, we don't lose at Blokworx. We win or we learn. There's two outcomes from every single thing that can happen. I can deploy a brand new service tomorrow, do all my QCs, all my double checks, and I can botch it. What did I do? I learned a ton. I learned a ton. And because I emulate candor, I go and apologize. And I set expectations with the partner. I say, hey, listen, I was super well intended. I wanted to deploy this vulnerability scan. I didn't think it would take down 12 Exchange servers. Also rhetorical, relax. Right? But what is that? It breeds trust. It breeds trust. And so winning or learning, you pivot that culture internally and you tell people, hey, listen, we do two things at your MSP name here. We win or we learn. That's it. There's no losing. There's no blame game. There's no negative repercussions. And there'll be engineers, there'll be employees, there'll be people on your team that win or learn often. And they could learn more than they win. And that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. And we protect that circle of safety, that it's okay to learn here. You know, something really, really, really near to my heart that's off script is that as the Blokworx SOC, we have over 65% veterans, former DoD active duty, that have transitioned out of a full-time, honestly, culture, not just job, it's a culture. And I was having a great conversation with Kenneth and guys earlier, that it's lonely leaving service. It's not, you know, we're built to be nimble, we're built to be resilient, right? That's how we're programmed, but you know, you get out of the DoD, you go into the private sector, and you know, I could sit on a train in Chicago and I could fit 100 people on this stage and we'll all have earphones in, we'll never look at each other. It's lonely. And so again, the winning or learning, it creates a circle of safety for your team and of our team as well. Hop on the YOLO bus. Now what on earth, Mike? We gotta laugh. We gotta laugh sometimes. We live in a stressful industry. We live in a glorious industry. Anyone go to a TBR, QBR, get an invoice, hand it to a client, and they say, I had no issues, we never submitted a ticket. What am I paying you guys for? Well, that's called uptime. Let me flip it. Let me flip it. Stick with me. Let me flip it. Office 365 outage never happens. Emails down for 10 minutes on a Monday. Everything else is great. KPIs are wonderful. You go to the TBR. What am I paying you guys for? It's a glorious industry, right? So sometimes we got to hop on the YOLO bus. We got to remember our response is our responsibility, and that ultimately they hired us for a reason, and that's to take care of them, to express candor, to remind them of prove the value that we're providing. And fifth and finally, do good works. At Blokworx, we believe that cybersecurity is cool, and we're nerds, and we love to do what we do, but it's not the chief end of man. It isn't, I don't want written on my tombstone, senior solutions engineer, okay? That we need to care for people. And so through that, it was a partnership that we started in late 2019, Operation Underground Railroad, who combats child trafficking, child sex slavery, things like that around the world. Tony Robbins, a lot of our nonprofits partner with them. We partnered with them, and a monthly allocation of our revenue goes to them in the form of a donation. That's not our why, but that's us emulating our core values. And that's the kind of thing that, you know, you can turn culture into a secret weapon internally when you realize that accountability has to be the standard minimum wage. We need that internally. And starting there, you can exude that externally. But I challenge you, do not flip the order. People can smell ingenuineness. I'm not saying there's people in here that are ingenuine, but I'm just saying before you make culture your secret weapon and your superpower from a marketing and sales standpoint, do a hip check internally. Pull at least 2 employees aside in the next 7 to 10 days and ask them, brutally honest, off the record, no strings attached. What's the culture like working here? We're in a crazy time right now. I want an honest answer. And you may start to cultivate a circle of safety that you maybe have never worked in, but you get to propagate for other people. So with that, we have about 4 minutes. Super willing to take questions or thoughts or feedback. I enjoyed the discussion piece, but hopefully that provided some value. Yes? Oh, the microphone, I'm sorry.
I got you. Right here.
I just want to share something about the, and I'm forgetting it, the hammer.
Candor hammer.
Candor hammer. I grew up in foster care, and I hate to be lied to. And one of the things that I want people to understand is I can tell when you're lying to me. And so a candor hammer, I love the people who will tell me a truth. And if you'll tell me a truth, I'll trust you.
And it's a hammer because it's painful to use or hear sometimes. And that's not always a bad thing, right? Now there's a way to do it. It's not a license to be a you-know-what. Right. Yeah, right.
Right here. Gotcha.
With sales, I can see through when you're just trying to butter me up is what I'm getting at,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
if you tell me a truth, and I can say, well, I can trust that
Right.
everything they're telling me in every other aspect is,
Right.
is accurate.
Exactly. Great thought. Yes?
So
To kind of touch on what Jennifer says when she always integrates movies, the villains often don't know that they're villains. They think they're the good guys sometimes. And so when you think about culture, sometimes, again, that first quote that you have for the Time magazine could be taken in a negative light, that because culture could be good or bad. And I think of the well-known thing like with the Ellen DeGeneres show, right?
Sure.
You had that type of culture there. And do they think that they was bad? That's the way it was?
Right.
Or do they think that's the way it should be? And like, how does a company shift that culture and actually recognize that that is not, that is a toxic culture?
It's a great question. And I would venture to say, I'm going to be humble about my response. I'm not going to say I'm certain, but candor wasn't really a core value there. That there wasn't a circle of safety that if I actually felt uncomfortable or if I actually felt threatened or I didn't feel safe in my role, that I could say that to somebody. And that's the circle of safety, that piece that we need to cultivate internally first. And that's why I say, right from the top, I don't think there's any more firmly grasped stakeholders in your businesses than you. And so if you want to take culture by the reins and really implement it, you need to have those honest questions. You ask honest questions for honest answers. And be ready for the response. Why? Because winning and learning. You've lost if you've had a toxic culture and you've not known about it. You've won or you've learned if you learn and you find a way to correct it. And again, I'm not saying that everything in here is a toxic culture, but I am saying that if we're not asking the questions and we're not cultivating a culture of candor, then we let just things happen the way they happen, right? And so it's something that requires intentionality. We need to be intentional about culture, probably far more than we say, oh, we got a bunch of good people. Yeah, is that helpful? Great point.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to share with everybody, we have Question Behind the Question, QBQ. We review a chapter or two out of that book in every company meeting. It is required reading for every employee. They get it on their desk when they get hired into the organization. And it's the question behind the question is all about personal accountability. So it's a great book for your organization, less than 2-hour read, and it can really change your organization.
Love that, Charles. Thank you.
By the way, he impacts everybody. That's part of our number 3 core value and required reading for us too. So,
love that. Great point. Yes.
So, I have pretty thick skin. My self-talk can be pretty negative. Accountability is not necessarily a problem for myself. I don't mind the word, but I feel like the word doesn't come up until the situation already is taken maybe a negative tone.
Yeah.
And so, how do you shift that? How do you use that word in a more frequent basis, I guess, without it always being with that kind of negative air?
Yeah.
Like, how do you get that word into your culture and into like the pantheon of your guys and your thought?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. Start using it. Start using it more. I try to, in almost every interaction, I know we're buttoning up time, so this will probably be the last question, last point, but I try to, in almost every interaction, I know that I'm finite. Thank God for Ari, who keeps me straight on follow-ups and things like that. I have a great team that holds me accountable. And I'll ask people, please hold me accountable. Because I lean into that. That's not a negative thing. I need to fulfill the promises I've made. I need my yes to be yes and my no to be no. I need to speak truthfully, and that's how not I as in uplifting me, that's how you cultivate a culture of honestly just transparency and integrity, right? And so if you have no problem with accountability at your organization, that's wonderful, but using the word more, hey guys, I'm passing word, here's some new things we're doing strategically. If you see anything that contradicts our quarterly rocks or our goals, hold me accountable. Hold me accountable. Start using that word in a healthy light, not where like someone's going to come up to you and rip you a new one. That's not the point, right? But it's like, hey Jeff, I know that we talked in our quarterly rock meeting about this being an initiative between now and July 30th. I currently am examining this and the effort that's going towards this client or this initiative, and I think it's stealing energy away from that. And this is why we talked about negative specific and positive specific feedback. Because we can't say, we're off track for our rock. What's going on? Right? That's not. Nobody's better because of that. So I think it's, number one, we need to start using it as leaders. Hold me accountable. And that's not a trap, right? We need to have an actual open door policy where there's not a knife on the door, right? And we cultivate that with our own selves, with our own team, and you'll be surprised. And say, guys, it's not a joke. Girls, it's not a joke. If there's something that's concerning you or troubling you, please come to me. Email me if it's not vocally communicative friendly or whatever it is in the office or if you're remote, but please, I want to know about it. Why? Because winning and learning. Because that if we're not aware of it, it's a risk, it's a threat, right? So again, I'm not going to solve that, but I think really starting to use it ourselves as leaders, making it a little bit more flattering of a word than it's directly tied to condemnation and ill behavior. But hey, here are our core values. Keep me accountable to these. And if I'm off, please tell me. And I will have off days. Mike Hornsby will have many off days. And I need to be held on the straight and narrow. So hopefully that's helpful. Is that it? Awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys.